Hey there, I'm Alan Mathews, and today we are going to be looking at this traditional little Spanish tune called Spanish Dance. You may have heard it, you may have heard something very similar to it. It's written by Anon, and so we can just jump right into it. I'm going to play it for you first just so that you can hear it, and then we will dive into it and pick it apart in every way we can think of. All right, here is the Spanish Dance. So now that you've got a basic idea on how it sounds, all those musical decisions I made where I slowed down, where I sped up, things like that, it's kind of off the cuff with this first run through. As we delve into it and actually explore this piece more, then we might look at some different decisions to make than those. But that was just a once through read. So here we have the Spanish Dance, and we're just going to first off take a look at the overall roadmap of what we're doing here, the big sections. And so to start off with, we're just going to take a look at some basic features. We have 3/4 time. That's one thing to take a note of. So we're going to be counting 1 and 2 and 3 and because we mainly have eighth notes. We're going to be looking through, and all of a sudden we see this repeat sign right here. And so this marks the end of a section. So we have the A section here, and then we do it again. So our form so far is A, and then what's going to happen? We continue along. Oh, and here we have this right here, which is a double bar. That marks the end of another section. So this must be the B section. And with this B section, we can see at the end we have this word fine. And so that's where we're eventually going to end. So this is the end of the piece, the fine. Looking on beyond that, we're going through, and then we have, there's our double bar again. So that means that this is our C section. So we have A, B, and then we have C, and then we go back. This is the DC al fine. DC al fine means go back to the beginning and play until you see the fine, which is the ending that we just talked about a second ago. So we're going back up to the top, so we're going to play the A section again. Oftentimes on the return, we do not play the repeats. So the second time through, we won't play the repeat. And then we'll just play straight into the B section, and then that's our thing. So A, B, C, A, B. So that's our main form here of how the piece is going to go. So whenever we're working, we can break this into our 3 different sections. These are kind of tidy, discrete little sections, and so that's a good way to work as well, a way to organize it in our minds, especially if we're going to memorize it. Okay, so then another thing to look at here, just going to get a clean score here, and that is looking at just the overall look of the page. So we have pretty tight eighth notes up here on the first couple of lines, and then on the last couple of lines, the notes look much more spread out. Can you see that? The distance from here to here is much longer than it is from here up here. And so it's tempting to look at that and say, well, these are longer notes down here. But upon closer inspection, then we can see that it's actually still just eighth notes. So actually, there's just solid eighth notes through this whole piece, except for at the endings of the sections, of those 2 sections. Other than that, it's solid eighth notes. So our rhythm here is pretty simple on the surface. Our basic all the rhythm together is pretty basic. So that's just a good thing to take note of, to take a look at right from the beginning. So now we're going to notice another feature of this piece as well, and that's this E that's happening all throughout the top up here. Can you see that? It's just this entire E. And so we can just look and say, okay, well, whenever we have a repeating pattern, the first thing to do is identify it as a repeating pattern and then say, well, then how long does it last? When does it end? Because that's what we want to take note of, is changes. And so if we can simplify things, we should, because that makes it easier to work on. So basically we've gone, this top E comes all the way through here until we get to right here, and then it stops right there. Then we have a similar thing going on through the next section, but then look, it's a different note up here. So and then it goes into different things. So it's the same idea, but all of a sudden we're changing notes in the second section. It goes up to an F for a while, goes back down to the E. So then we can just take a look at that. We're just glancing through right now and just looking at overall features. One other feature I just want to take note of really fast here, and that is this right here. We have up notes, or we have up stems and down stems. So if you'll notice, all these up stems and down stems. So we have solid eighth notes across the top, right? All the barred together. And then we have these down stems right here. So we have different things going on. When we're looking at this, that means that there's a melody and a bass line written in together, or we've got two different parts basically that have been combined so that the rhythm adds up to 3 full beats per measure, 3 full quarter notes worth of beats per measure for this song. And so as we're doing this, but they're not all created equal. Whenever we have a repeating note going on, well, that is not the melody. The melody isn't one note banging over and over like the water torture or something like that. Ding, 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 ding. We don't want to bring that out. So we basically want to look at that. So when we're learning it, we could just eradicate it all together and say, okay, we know that there's this E ringing on top this whole time. So to begin with, we're not even going to mess with it at all. We'll add it in later. Take it out, and that'll just simplify the piece even more. And so let's just take a look at, really quick here, let's take a look at this. This is the A section, a little bit skewed on the image here, but from here to here, this is our A section here, just zooming in a little bit. Again, so you can just see it again, we have down stems here. Let's get a little brighter color here to work with. We have these down stems, and then we have the up stems, and we're just going to ignore this E completely. Now, you can download all of these pages and everything else from the link below. So please just do that so you can follow along. But then also, and I've taken it and actually just gotten rid of the top notes altogether so that you can just see this simplified melody here, to where you just have nothing but the melody, which happens to be in the bass. And this is the same piece. It's just I took out the E's. So you'll eventually put in these E's after every single note. But this is just the simplified, version of it. And again, you can download this. Now, if we look then we can go through and actually get into these particular notes, right, and start learning it. Now, this A section right here, this is just the A section is just the top line. We can look at this as just all these different notes. That's one way. Or we could look at it as chord shapes. And so that each measure has its own discrete shape. And I've actually done that for you as well. So that's just this right here. This is just the chord shapes. Slightly different font on this one. I don't know what went on there. But then, so instead of jumping in and just remembering note, 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 over and over for the entire 8 measures that is our A section, instead you could actually just bring it down to 8 different shapes. So instead of 24 notes, 8 times 3, you could actually just bring it down and think of 8 different shapes. And so then what I've done is just stacked them. And so in your practice, you could simply play, look at the entire note or the entire measure, as a group and just play all the notes in the measure at one time. That's the first one. And then we have, and then back. And so you can just do this. Which is pretty fast. So if you just practice that, then you're basically getting your left hand. What we're basically doing is just doing the left hand by itself, right? If you've watched my 7 steps of learning any piece, and you'll find a link to that below as well if you'd like to, then you can kind of see that we're basically going over those 7 steps here. I'm not really breaking them apart, but the 7 steps are, in short, make sure you know the rhythm, all the ink on the page, all the musical markings, the left hand by itself, the right hand by itself, put them together, but then take corrective pauses, and then put them together and put it into time. And so those are basically the 7 steps in a nutshell. With this step, this is just the left hand. So the left hand is basically just doing these chords. Boom, 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 boom. You can go through here and just practice it in this way, and it will speed up your learning of the piece immensely. What a lot of beginners do is they get a piece of music and they just dive right in. They start right at the beginning and they say, okay, the first note is, boom, and the second note is, and the third note is, and they just go through this, and it's not a really efficient way of practicing. Master players don't practice this way. They look at bigger patterns, bigger shapes, things like this, and that way you can kind of take all these little bitty bits that the composer gives us and make them into chunks and make them into lines and things like this. So instead of just thinking my first note is, you can think my first measure is this chord. Now, I've given you these chords right here, and up top, if you'll notice, then I've written in this right here. And this is kind of a tablature. I just want to explain it really quick. The first number, if you don't know how to read this, is a kind of a quick way of jotting down chord shapes. This first X right here means the lowest string. There's 6 characters, 6 things. So the first X, don't play the lowest string, don't play the 5th string, don't play the 4th string, 2nd fret. So the 2 means the 2nd fret on the 3rd string, the 1st fret on the 2nd string, and then the open 1st string. And so then you end up with the shape. What this doesn't tell you is what fingers to use, what order to play them in, anything like that. All it does is say, put your left hand fingers here. That's it. And so it's an incomplete form of tablature, as most tablature is incomplete. There's nothing like just reading music. I mean, if you've got music and you work out your fingerings, you can pretty much do it all. But then again, sometimes it's much simpler to use tablature, especially if you're just starting out and reading notes is really hard for you. Then use some tablature if you need to, but then work on your skills of reading at the same time so that over time you can play more advanced music, because really advanced music, tab just doesn't cut it. There's too much going on in the music. Then if you just use tab to play advanced pieces, it's not going to sound good. I don't care how good of a guitarist you are. You're not going to get all the information from the page, and so you're not going to bring out all the music that's on the page. You may get all the notes, but there's balance issues and rhythmic things. There's a lot going on in music. But tablature is great for what it is. I love it. So that's just something you can do. Another test you can give yourself is to figure out what these chords are. And this will kind of exercise your music theory and also your knowledge of your basic shapes. For instance, this first chord, I'm just going to give it to you, is an A minor chord. And if you look, this is just a regular A minor chord, X-O-2-2-1-0, A minor. Well, this is just the top little part of it. And we're using different fingers in this song for it, but it's still the top half of an A minor chord. And so to know that, then to remember this, you could just think it's an A minor. Okay, how does this piece start? It goes A minor, and then it slides up 2 frets, and then it comes back, and you could know if you know this chord. And so you can just do it in this way. It makes it a lot better. In the notes below in your downloads, I'm giving you a blank one. This is exactly what you're looking at right here. I'm giving you this sheet, which doesn't have any answers on it, and then I've also got an answer key that tells you what the chords are on a different page with this on it as well. So that way you can go and check yourself. But it'd be a nice little quiz to give yourself to actually look through and try to figure out what chords these are. And remember, in some of them, the bass note, the lowest note played, won't necessarily be the root of the chord. For instance, if you're playing a G chord, sometimes you'll just get this, those two notes. And it's part of a G chord, but you're not playing the low G note. You're not playing every single, all 6 strings. You're just playing 2 of them. So it's just a partial chord shape. But if you can think about your chord shapes and then find these particular shapes on the page, find those within your chord shapes, it's a great habit to get into, to start looking at music in that way. It'll allow you to memorize things much quicker and learn things much more quickly as well. And just understand the music more. It's part of your growth as a musician to be able to start recognizing that. Of course, these things take time, and it's perfectly fine if it feels overwhelming or difficult or anything like that, and do it for a couple of minutes and then stop and then go do something else. It's perfectly fine. And so then how are we going to practice this? We've got our chord shapes first. I'm just telling you how to practice here. First off, we're just going to learn our chord shapes here, whatever they were. Learn those in the left hand just as chunk shapes. And then what we could do at this point is look at how are we going to work the dynamics on this? How are we going to shape this? Because we don't want to just bang every single note out the exact same. We want some kind of shape to this, right? We want things to swell and to fade and to just be more interesting. But then the question is, how do we do it? Now, there's a basic rule. There are several basic rules, one of which is if notes are going up, make them get quieter. And if they're going down, make them get louder. And this works 90% of the time. It doesn't work all the time, but it works most of the time, a large majority of the time. And so if you can get into the habit of playing this way, everything you play will be much more beautiful. Even if you're just sight reading, like I just sight read this piece, and it sounded okay. I mean, I probably flubbed some notes and did some things that might not have been the best thing, but something was happening in there anyway. And it had some sort of rhyme and reason to it. So if you can get into the habit of doing this, when you see melody notes going up, then get softer. If they're going down, get louder. If you can do this, then it'll just help you out. Now, in a piece like this, you look at it and they're bouncing all over the place, right? It goes up and then back down and then up and then up and then back down. And so we've got this thing and it's constantly doing this type of thing. And so, especially because we're just working these chords, right? So another thing that we can do is to look at, kind of just draw out certain notes and say, okay, well, if we had to simplify this down even more, what would actually be like the main thing that's happening here? And then so what I've done here is I've actually just taken all the fluff out and just gotten the very core notes. This is basically the first note of the measure. If it's a chord, and we go back to the same note, then I've just taken the very first note of the measure, or whatever note I thought was kind of the most important note. It's not always the first note of the measure. So now we have this framework melody here that we can now go and add some dynamics to, because it's so much easier to see kind of the basic movement of the line in this way. So as we said, here's our line. That's our A section. So if we just apply this basic rule of if it's going up, get softer, if it's going down, get louder, then we can just add in our dynamics in this way to it. So we can start here, start nice and strong because it's right at the beginning of the piece. We're going up here, right? Oops. We're going up here, so we're going to get softer from that note to that note. So just take it, back off a little bit, and now look what's happening. Now we're going down again, so we're just going to have a nice big crescendo to there. And look, now this is an interesting spot too. Actually, we'll come back to this in just a second. But then we're going back up to here, right? we're going back high again. Once we get to right here, we're going high, and then we just have all this straight down notes, right? This nice scale down, A, G, F, E. And so we're just going to just get louder, that whole thing. That means we need to get quiet so that we can get louder later, right? Otherwise, we have nowhere to go. So when we're dealing with this, I just want to point out too, that even if the piece is quiet, you can still have louds and softs going on within that. And if the whole piece is loud, you still have louds and softs going on within that. It's just your context is different, right? It's just like if you're at a party talking, you're not monotone, but you're probably talking louder than if you were in a quiet restaurant with your lover. It's probably a different, there's still dynamics within the thing. It's just the whole scale is different. And this is the same exact thing here. So the overall dynamics we haven't talked about yet, but within that, all this little detail goes on, and it's going to be the same whether, regardless of how you do the large scale dynamics, more or less. Now let's come back to this spot right here. Now, whenever we have this is a classic section right here. I actually want a clean page to look at this. This section right here. This right here. This is a common thing, and that is we're going across a bar line. It doesn't have to be across a bar line, but it very commonly is, from a low note jumping up to a higher note, right? 3, 1. Now, because it's higher, we typically want to go softer anyway, but especially if we've got a big low note down here, then we want to make this really loud. Bottom. If you think about jumping on a diving board on a pool, you just walk up and go boom, boom, right? Your force lies in the jump down, boom, boom, and that just sends us up, da-dum. And it really sets us up and lets that top note just float out of there. It gives it some levity, definitely moves the music forward really nicely, as opposed to the other way, dum, dum. It doesn't really work as well. It might for a certain situation once in a while, but in the middle of our first line of our piece, not so well. For most times, this is the way to do it. So if you're approaching a note by a jump, if you're jumping from a lower note to a higher note, make the lower note loud, make the higher note soft. In general, this really works, and it really moves your music forward and it adds to the overall beauty of the piece, and that's what we're doing. So whenever we're doing this, then we want to accent this note. Now, if we back that up to our last one here, then we basically, what that means is then we're basically just crescendoing this piece. We're crescendoing this all the way to there, but giving it an extra punch at the end. So now let's just listen to this in this way. 1, 2, now back off to the B. More, 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 back off. More, more, more. It's a nice little shape within there. So now the entire thing could be soft. Really quiet. More, back off, more, more, more. So that the entire thing can be at a piano, or the entire thing can be at a forte, but we're still doing all this stuff within there. Now, next, we have this repeat right here, right? And because we have this repeat, we want to join this and think of it as one thing. This isn't, because this is kind of an easy instance of this, but in other places it's not as easy, so I just want to talk about it anyway. We're getting louder to the end here, right? So we just crescendoed this ending right here, right? We just did this big crescendo to the end. Now, when we do that, ideally, we start the new section kind of at the same type of level as we just ended the previous section. So if we're doing this turnaround here, this repeat, if we started this soft, it would sound like we were starting over. If we started the first note again soft, it would sound like we were starting over. So instead of doing that, we start in strong and then go forward from that. In this case, it's pretty easy because that's what we were doing anyway. But in some other places, you wouldn't do that. So that's the A section. So here we have these two 8-bar sections. This is 8 bars and this is 8 bars. And so in the middle of it is our repeat. It's all written as one 8-bar section with a repeat sign at the end, but if we take it apart and look at it, then we've got this big long line, right? So then if instead of just making little bitty bits, like little bitty 4 bars phrases like this, which is kind of how it's written if you listen to it, you've just got 4 and 4, 4 and 4. So instead of doing all these little bitty bits like this, what you can do then is make big bits. So you can think, okay, this entire first thing, the overall scheme of this will be to get larger, and then the overall scheme of the second 8 will be to get quieter. We still have all the other stuff going on inside there, but the overall scheme could be this. That's one way. You could do, another way would be to just think, I'm just going to do one big crescendo over the entire thing. That means that you have to really, really save and make sure that you're not getting too loud on your first time so that then you can continue to layer it and really build it up right at the very end of the second one to really push it forward to make this happen. That's pretty exciting. I probably wouldn't go the other way, to go this way, one big decrescendo, simply because it's kind of dying away at that point. Now, to be able to do it, it kind of seems like it would suck the energy out, doesn't it? To kind of constantly be fading away. It might work, especially in a really large piece, like a, multiple pages, 5 to 10 minute or more piece. Then this kind of thing could work. But in a very small piece like this, we want to just grab the energy and never let it go. We want it to really continue the energy. In big pieces we do as well, but we can play with larger structures in that way on bigger pieces. On this one, I would think of it always moving forward, meaning getting louder. So we want to find places to back off so that then we can get louder again, which is the point of this right here, of getting softer at the end of this section. It enables us to then start the next section quieter and then move forward with that so that there's more action in the next section. If we end it very loud, then the next section might have to get quieter so that then we can have somewhere to go in the C section, in the third section. So these are just all the decisions we have to make on this. And there's not necessarily one right way, although there are a lot of wrong ways. It's not completely subjective. And there's not to soapbox about this too heavily right now, but it's not completely subjective. There are many rights, but there are also some definite wrongs and things that just don't work. Just like in the way that we use words, we can use words in a lot of different ways, but there are some times that are just wrong to use. We can use words and it's just simply wrong. It's not subjective, it's not creative, it's not artistic, it's just wrong. And so it's the exact same way in music. It has to work. And so yes, there is room for interpretation and mood and passion and all this kind of stuff. But if you're shooting yourself in the foot with the decisions that you make and it doesn't actually serve the music, then it's just wrong. So we're just trying to get it right in some way. And if we can just decide, okay, does this move the music and the excitement forward? Then good. Does this stop the action and make kind of a moment where things have to stop and then start back up? Then we want to minimize those. Sometimes we want to use those, but we want to keep things moving, just like a good book. Let's look at the B section. The exact same issues are at stake in the B section. Yes? This is our B section right here. The exact same issues are at stake here. I'm not going to spend much time on this section because it really is the exact same stuff as going on before. Really important, play your chords. Go back to the exact same process of just playing the chords, then playing the melody. Look at the framework melody. You can download that and everything else on here to be able to look at it. Just going to go straight over here to the dynamics, or to this framework here. So with this second line right here, this is our B section right here. And we can look, and we basically have the same thing, right? We have big descending line, so we're going to get louder. Then we're going up. Now with this measure right here, if you look at it in the actual piece of music, This is our melody right here. This is it right here. This is that same melody. And so the G sharp is actually the third note in it, and I made it as the framework melody. It's because otherwise this note is staying the same. And so really, as far as making it the more interesting line, it kind of says what's going on better to make the third one it and then go up. So we can just look at that. And so looking at this then, we get louder down here, we're getting quieter to here, all the way to here. And then from this way, we have this big jump down. And so you could say, well, it's going down, so I'm going to crescendo, right? Well, you could do that, and that's definitely a possibility. You could also go the other direction because it's at the end, and so it depends on how you want to end this. You could play it both ways and see which one serves your bigger purpose more as far as the way that you want to connect into the next piece down here and everything. So you could, it makes decision. You can make your decisions based on those things. But it could go this way if you wanted it to, especially since if we remember the thing, it's, I think it's an E and then a C. So it actually does have this big descending line going down right there. But there's your thing. There's one other thing I want to look at with this, and that is this right here. Because one of the things that are really interesting in music, I know there's a lot of stuff going on here. I know these are very dense videos. Another thing that's really interesting in music is half steps. And a half step, for instance, is this right here. G sharp to A is a half step. It's only one fret away. Whenever we get these, they're really interesting in music. So we want to bring them out. We want to really mark them by accenting them or something. Now, if we look at this melody that we've got here, then we notice that it's actually right across the bar right here. And so whenever that happens, da, da, ti, do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that's what it is. It typically marks a change in harmony. And so it's really interesting. So whenever we see these, G sharp A, right across the bar like that, really bring out that G sharp, da, da. You could even make it long if you wanted, dun, dun, da, dum, just a little bit if you wanted to. It might or might not work as far as playing with the time with it, but definitely don't short it, in other words. You also want to really connect them. They really need to connect. If you have a half step, you want to bring out the lower, and you also want to connect. It doesn't really make sense to go. Whenever we break them apart and there's a space in between them, it kind of loses the punch. It kind of lets the air out of the balloon. Ti, do. Really bring it out. Make it a thing. It's interesting. It brings us right back to the one chord, the A minor again in this case. And it oftentimes does. So really make a big deal out of it. If you get these half steps, look for the half steps and work them. Make a big deal out of them. They're interesting. Look, just glancing down, here's another one down here at the end of the C section. We'll talk about the C section in a minute, but while we're talking about this issue, this would be another one. You could practice them side by side. Ti, do. That's a big marcato sign, supposed to be. But so that, and then that continues. Do you remember where it goes? It goes all the way back up to the first note again. And so which is the A? Da, dum. So there it is. That is our second section. Looking at the third section, we have our C section. Now in this section, we have a little bit different stuff going on, right? So starting here to the end, this is our C section. And in this C section, we start off with kind of the same thing, right? Da, 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 dun, dun. But then we get over to right here. right? We got this steady beat going on with this high note over and over and over. But then we get to these last 4 measures. We split this last section C into 4 different little bits. And we actually have something different on this last. We actually have a longer pattern. We have been doing this 2-note boop up, boop up, boop up, bass treble going on. Bass, treble, bass, treble, bass, treble. Now we have now we really break it into 1 and 2 and then 3 and is a different thing. If we look at our melody for this, then we can see that we've got this different rhythm down here. Right here, right? So we've been going these quarter notes the entire piece, except for our endings. And then we've got half note, quarter, half note, quarter, half note, quarter, half note, quarter. And so just to notice that. You can also notice that the first note of each of these lines is a descending line. F, E, D, E, and then it goes back up. Here we are. Yeah, as a framework melody, I just put the 1 note per measure because it's really the other stuff is kind of fluff getting us to that next one. So you could look at that as well and then just shape your line in that way. As this goes on, you can just shape that. So you could practice this last section a little bit separately. You still practice it with your shapes and whatever you're doing in that way, with your left hand by itself as it's going. And then from there, then you can add in the arpeggio pattern. And so let's just talk really quick then about the nutshell of what we've been talking about here for this entire time. The main thing in learning pieces is to, instead of just plowing in from the first note and playing the first note and the second note and just like here, that's amateur hour. Even if you are an amateur, you can step it up by identifying patterns in it. Well, you can just go through the 7 steps that I lay out, but you could also, that are below, you could also then identify patterns and find new ways of practicing. So simplify, simplify, simplify. If you see a pattern and there's some piece of it that's really repetitive, take it out. If you see up stems and down stems, separate them. Practice just the down stems, practice just the up stems in any type of piece. This is what classical guitar stuff is really about, because we have this bottom line that is doing a bass line. We have the upper line, which is oftentimes a melody that's got its own thing going on. And if we're really going to play this, it's called polyphonic music, polyphony, multiple lines going on at the same time. If we're going to do this, we have to be able to separate those lines and actually play them with character separately. And the quickest way and the easiest way to do all that is to separate it out and play them separately and then put them back together. Otherwise, it's just too much. It's like if you had to memorize an entire conversation of 3 or 4 different people talking. It would be easier, oftentimes, to take out just one person's, if you have to keep track of who's saying what, take out one person's and memorize all those lines. You do it also all together, but we're talking about in addition to. So you're working in different ways constantly, so that in your practice, you don't get into the rut of just doing one thing and then you do it 1,000 times. That sucks. That's not a good way to work. Instead, what you could do is take it and work on just the bass line and then just the treble line and then put them both back together again. Or you could work on just the chords like we did in this one and then just the melody like we also did in this one and then put it all back together again as well. It doesn't mean that you have to just do that for the entire piece, but do it for a couple minutes. And then come back and put it back in, and then do another couple of bars for another couple of minutes, and then put it back in, so that you're constantly changing and shifting your perspective on it. You can do it in different ways. Really work the dynamics in on a simplified basis from just the framework melody or just the melody. Put the dynamics into that, and then put them back into all the other stuff with that high E bouncing around constantly, doing all that kind of stuff. So that's what I hope you can take from this video is do different things. Whatever it is that you're doing, see if you can add some more variety to it. See if you can practice in different ways so that you're working on the piece and not just playing the piece over and over. This takes a little bit of discipline. It takes taking your eye off the end goal and really just making the little sections the end goals into themselves so that you can really just embrace working in such a way as to just be dialing in little things, and know that if you work in this way, your overall piece will get played better faster. You will bring it up to a higher level much more quickly than you would if you just bang the thing out 1,000 times, because that way you'll never get it good. You play a piece 1,000 times and think it'll get good, you're lying to yourself, or you're just wrong, I'm sorry. But it's just not gonna happen. You won't play it well in that way. You might play it, you might get all the notes, but it's not gonna be good. It's not gonna be musically good. So hopefully this will help you get it good. Okay, take care, it's so good to see you. Please subscribe to this station. Go over to Classical Guitar Shed, you'll see the link down below, and get more tutorials like this. You can also get all the supplementary materials for this so that you can actually practice this piece, bring it up, and I'd love to hear your comments about the process in the comments. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.